working with me, and this is Emily's third year here. And Emily is a senior at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is well represented here. And Sean Marie, of course, is our lawyer, and she's sitting over here, and she's been with us now for a number of years. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started. I think, are we going to take this bill up first, I guess? We have Senate Bill 43. This is the bill that we saw last year. We actually passed it out of this committee. It went to the full House. It already passed the Senate. The Senate bill passed the Senate, came here, passed out of this committee, went to the full House, and there were some, I think there were some questions. It was very late in the session, I think, before we got it down there, and there were some questions that came up. And it's my understanding that probably those questions, for at least for the most part, have been answered and taken care of. But I will recognize, say, Senator, who you going to do it?
I'm gonna present.
Okay, if you will go ahead.
Senator, and then I'm gonna present the bill if that's okay.
Okay. Yes, Representative Dollar, Chairman Dollar. Might be a little early for that, but I'll recognize you at some point if you would like.
I'll make it quick.
Okay.
I got a nice concise. I put some nice guardrails up so I don't blabber. All right, so committee, I come before you today to represent Senate Bill 43. This bill removes the restriction placed on municipally ran utility companies from the 1970s. Originally, this restriction required a voter referendum for a utility to issue revenue bonds to expand gas, electric, and water service. Over the years, gas and water restrictions have been removed, but this last piece, the electric, is still hanging out there. By removing this restriction, my utility will be treated like every other city, MEAG city, in the state. If this bill passes, it would allow my utility to borrow money based upon revenue streams of the utility, not taxpayer liabilities. They are not liable for these debts. This change would allow my utility to react to economic development opportunities in a swifter and more efficient manner. Much like the bond package we vote on every year in Atlanta, my voters have the opportunity to elect a city council member that will vote and approve these bonds before they are issued. You have before you a resolution signed by my city council unanimously supporting this bill. You also have a list of a statewide utility rates for the winter of 2019. It shows that my residential rates are roughly half the statewide average. Dalton Utilities has consistently sold power at a loss to its residential customer base because 70% of its revenues are industrial. This is a very rare customer mix that allows our utility to also commit a third of my city's budget, roughly $10 million annually. As you can see, the success of Dalton Utilities and its ability to compete is imperative to the success of my community and the success of manufacturing in Northwest Georgia. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? I don't think I see it. Okay, we do have a question. Okay. Representative Cantrell.
Well, Representative Carpenter, is this the exact same bill we had last year?
Exact same bill, yes,
Have
sir.
the issues been addressed that caused it to?
I believe so. We
Fair
had
on the floor last year.
we had a member that was concerned that there weren't public hearings held about the bill in our community, so we held 2 public hearings this off season. We printed the information all in the paper. There was no issue. I literally had 0 phone calls about this issue.
Good work. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Moore.
Hi, Representative Carpenter.
How are you?
Hey, I'm good. So I'm glad to hear you guys had public hearings about this bill, so kudos to you for doing that. If you recall, last time we discussed this bill in this committee before the bill failed in bipartisan manner on the floor of the House, I had asked you the question, has Dalton Utilities ever attempted to have a referendum in order to approve the issuance of a bond? And do you recall your answer when I asked you that?
I
at the
believe I
time?
said yes back in the 70s when we first initially invested in nuclear power.
Well, if you don't mind, your answer at the time during committee was that you didn't know, but you'd get back to me, right?
Okay. Well,
And then,
yes.
Yeah, and then off the record, after committee, you came and told me what you just said. Isn't that correct?
I guess so. Yeah, it was a blur. But
So-
yes,
So the referendum, which is currently law, that Dalton Utilities has to get voter approval before they issue a bond, it has worked in the past. Isn't that correct? That's what you just said.
I assume so. But I do believe that economic development in 1970 is a lot different than economic development in 2020. I think that's a fair assessment.
Has democracy changed since then?
Does your democracy and your community vote on funding mechanisms of your utility?
Well, that's not part of this bill right now. We're talking about Dalton.
This bill is about parity across the state.
And so isn't the effect of this bill to take away the vote of the people? Even if that's not the motive for it, that is the effect. Isn't that right?
I would say that the average voter in Dalton, Georgia, votes for a city councilman who represents him as a republic should do.
And you trust them to make the right decision when they vote for council, right?
I would trust him to vote for the council member, and I would trust that the council member would do the will of the people.
And would you trust the people of Dalton to make the right decision on a bond referendum?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think if you see sometimes, I don't know if you've ever been in a community where a SPLOST has been not upheld or there's been a loss of a SPLOST vote. So sometimes if you get a small election, things can change. It's not always the majority that turns out for all elections.
Well, thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Montahan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Representative, for presenting the bill. Let me ask a few quick questions. That is, out of how many EMCs in the state have these regulations,
Nobody.
except for Dalton?
There's a city of Hampton and a city of Chickamauga that is held to this standard. They've expressed no interest in this legislation.
And that's all within Dalton EMC. Is that right?
No. So there's 3 cities in the state of Georgia that are not part of a MEAG city.
Okay.
You've got Hampton, Georgia, which is just here in Henry County, and you have Chickamauga and Dalton. Those are the 3 out of the whole state of Georgia. The other 2 entities had no interest in this legislation.
But now this only affects Dalton EMC. This bill does, right?
Dalton Utilities, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Because we have
Dalton
an
Utilities.
EMC too. So
Okay, well, Dalton Utilities. So out of all the utilities, y'all the only ones being regulated this way.
it's crazy.
Out of every one of them. And the bill was passed in 1970.
That's right. So yep, the restriction was passed in 1970, and so what happened is you saw a lot of cities join MEAG because of it, and that was their way to not have to do that. It was a pressure for us to join MEAG, basically, and we didn't.
I see. Look, that's my only question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Dollar, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. Are you aware of any members of this committee that have offered a bill to bring their utility under the same requirements that you have?
I've yet to see that one, but I'll be glad to look
Thank
into
you.
it.
That's your question. Representative Drenner, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. If I recall correctly, this measure was a local bill, a local issue between yourself and other members of your delegation. Is that true?
That's correct.
And-
Originally, so the original 2 years ago, that was the piece, and then we went to a general bill. That's why
But
we're
the
here.
reason that you went to a general bill was because you couldn't get consensus within your delegation. Is that true?
That is correct.
So that has not changed?
I think it's changed, but
Then
you
why
know,
don't we-
delegation issues sometimes can be a challenge. I don't know how your delegation works, but I think that's uniform. But I have a feeling you understand my concerns.
Dare I respond?
I dare you.
No,
Double dog dare you.
no. They are an opportunity for self-growth. Let me say it that way.
I'm gonna get a shirt that says that.
Yes. So, in essence, your delegation is still opposed to this particular bill.
So the other 2/3 of my delegation are not here to answer that, but it's my understanding that we're all in the same agreement. But this bill, having been passed out of the Senate, is one step from rules, one step to the House floor. So to start that whole process over is not of my heart's desire, if you will.
Would it seem a lot easier to do it as a local measure than to do it as a general statute? Because now I have to ask my follow-up question, which is, does this allow Dalton to go into depth further with regard to Plant Vogel?
It would. I can tell you where we stand with Vogel right now, and it's not our intentions. We've paid over $200 million towards Vogel out of our pocket over the years. We owe another $78 million over the next 3 years that we plan to pay out of pocket. So that is not the desire of our community and our utility. But it would allow that, yes, ma'am, in all honesty.
So whether you agree or disagree about Plant Vogel, this measure would disenfranchise your voters with regard to Plant Vogel and allow additional debt. Is that true?
It would allow additional lead, absolutely. And I can give you the totals. I actually ran some figures because I'm a finance guy. So our current, if we completely borrowed the $70 million, if this bill passed and we borrowed $70 million the next day, we would be $300 million in debt on $1.2 billion worth of assets. So that is roughly 25% debt to asset ratio. It's extremely strong financial company when we wouldn't have a problem paying that back, and there wouldn't be a bond company in the world that wouldn't jump on it. So I don't see that even if we borrowed the $70 million that we owe to finish up Vogel, that there would be an issue in paying that back, and there would be rate increases or concerns from all the ratepayers.
Okay, one more question. But that debt is as of today?
That's literally exactly what we owe, right? So,
Today.
yeah, as of today. So our total buy-in with Vogel was $273 million. We paid $200. We owe $73 over the next 3 years.
Thank
Any more?
you.
I don't see any further questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, I'm good.
Does the senator wish to speak on it? It's your bill, so.
Can I borrow your seat there?
Absolutely.
I think Casey's doing pretty good, so just be careful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say that this is something that the City of Dalton's wanted to do for a long time. The City of Dalton unanimously passed this. The City Council did with the mayor's vote support, and also, it also takes a Superior Court judge to sign off on any time if they're going to issue revenue bonds. The Superior Court judge has to also oversee that. I just think that this is literally right now. 2 years ago, the City of Dalton, and with the City of Dalton's approval, this Dalton Utilities issued $80 million in revenue bonds for water filtration system, and so and they didn't have to come to this body for that. So this is because that's not in the Georgia code. So this is basically just allowing the City of Dalton and its utility to have control of its own destiny.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
I don't
sir.
see any questions. Is there? I don't see anybody signed up to speak. We do have someone signed up to speak. We have a couple. If you'll just keep it brief, we have Bernita Haynes. And like I said, if you just, yes, that's fine. If you just tell us who you are, who you represent, and then just a brief explanation of why you support or don't support or neutral, whatever your position is on the bill.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for pronouncing my name right. I did not expect it to be pronounced correctly. I'm Bernita Haynes on behalf of Georgia Watch, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter today. Georgia Watch has followed this issue closely for years. We do believe it is important to not change the rules in one city in ways that will affect all Georgians and disenfranchise Dalton residents. We're specifically concerned that the bill, as is, can be used to remove any checks that the voting public has on rising costs at Plant Vogel. This bill, as is, removes Georgians' voices from the decision-making process around the issue of revenue certifications while leaving them on the hook for millions of dollars. Respectfully, unless this bill is amended to prohibit Vogel financing without a referendum, we will continue to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Mark Woodall, if you will tell us, you're Mark Woodall, if you'll tell us who you represent and brief explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Woodall with the Sierra Club, here on behalf of our 50,000 members and supporters for the third year in a row to oppose this legislation. As was mentioned, this started out as a local bill, then it became House Bill 924 2 years ago. Went to House Ways and Means. At the first hearing, Chairman Chuck Martin had the best thing I've heard, the best questions. Why would you take away the people's vote? Why would you do that? So I think what Chairman Martin said 2 years ago still applies. In Ways and Means, Chairman Jay Powell would not allow that bill to come out. Senate Bill 43 came out of this committee last year, and when Jay Powell was chairman of the House Rules, it didn't come out then. It was, as mentioned, attached to House Bill 322 late on the last night of the session. It got 91 votes. It was reconsidered and voted down. And this bill, it's taken away the people's right to vote, so it ought to be voted down again, in our opinion. Thank you, sir.
All right, I think there is a question. If you want, would you like to answer a question or respond to a question? Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for the sake of clarity, and I apologize I was late. We're having all these different meetings at the same time. So are you saying that this bill, as written, there are no changes to the previous bill that was voted down?
I don't believe there's been any changes. The 300
same
million.
bill. Representative?
Do I have to? No, there you go. Thanks. So this bill is the same bill that passed out of this committee last year that was left in rules. And then there was an attachment on the 326 last year of a different bill that came across and got voted down. The issue that held it up in rules was not Jay Powell. Jay Powell supported this bill. Me and Chairman Powell had many conversations about this bill, and he believed in parity. And I can assure you that if he was here today, he would be voting for this bill because we've had 1,000 conversations about it.
Well, I sure wish he was here, but I think that language that we've got on 43 is the same as that language that was voted down at the last minute.
Completely same. Two different bills, same
Okay.
language.
All right.
And I'm not sure why it got voted down. I'd still kind of like to hear the reason people changed their vote, but.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowen, if you would tell us who you are, who you represent. Oh, I'm sorry. And first of all, I didn't understand. Representative Kelly, you have a question of the previous speaker.
Maybe just a clarification, because I was in that Ways and Means meeting a couple of years ago when we took this up. In fact, it was I that made the motion to table it at the time. The bill had moved pretty quickly, and at that point, I, along with several members of the committee, didn't feel like we had the proper education of the issue and understanding at that time. Out of an abundance of caution, we asked to table the bill and held off by that. I'll tell you that over those couple of years, and even after this year to this year, I've had an opportunity to be educated. And while the original, if we're rehashing the past, I was going to originally table the bill, I'm looking forward to supporting the bill today.
Thank you. Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Roy Bowen with the Georgia Association of Manufacturers. I think, as you all are aware, Northwest Georgia has really rebounded from the depths of the Great Recession, largely on the basis of a resurgence of an increasingly diverse manufacturing sector. And for manufacturers to remain competitive, they require reliably delivered and competitively priced energy from a financially secure utility. Dalton Utilities has been able to provide energy on those terms for manufacturers, further giving the opportunity for job growth. As was mentioned earlier, manufacturers represent 70% of the revenue stream for Dalton Utilities. Consequently, manufacturers will take on a commensurate share of the obligation of any bonds that are issued. So the Georgia Association of Manufacturers supports Senate Bill 43, which we believe will ensure the integrity of Dalton Utilities' ability to continue to serve not only manufacturing companies, but all of the utilities customers. And for those reasons, and for the reasons articulated by Representative Carpenter and Senator Payne, we urge your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 43. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Representative Carpenter or Senator, do either one of you have any closing statements you'd like to make? Closing comments?
Consideration.
Okay, well, we're in a posture here to possibly take some action. Are you comfortable with us taking action at this time? What is the will of the committee? Representative Dollar, Chairman Dollar, do you want to make a motion? Okay. Got a second? Second. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of this proposition indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by saying no? No. Okay, it seems clear to me that the ayes have it, and this Senate Bill 43, LC 363724, that's the correct number, is that, Representative? LC, it would have to be, LC 363724 has received a due pass recommendation from the House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee, and is therefore ready to take to the Rules Committee. Congratulations. Thank you. All right, we have an important discussion in front of us, so let's go ahead and move on with this. Congratulations on your bill. I think, as everybody knows, the related to cybersecurity, we as individuals, businesses, government entities are more and more coming under cyber attacks, threats, and being what's the word? Taken hostage, having their computer systems taken hostage, and being asked to pay ransom for that. So I felt like it was important to get some a presentation on this. We have someone from Georgia Tech to kind of give us some background on it, the whole issue of it, and we have Georgia Technology. Wait a minute, GTA, Georgia Authority. That's the authority. We just talked about how confusing. Okay. Georgia Technology Authority here to talk about how the a point of contact, if we have a point of contact within the state, and I had a conversation during the summer with a representative from GMA who we had a conversation about if local governments, counties, or cities were to have an issue come up, would there be somebody with the state that could offer some help? And that's kind of where this has come from. And it's an important issue. I mean, it really is. And so to me, it's a complex issue, but it's an important issue. And with that, I think we have, let's see, Jimmy Lewis, Chief Information Security Officer, Cybersecurity with Georgia Institute of Technology. So if you could kind of give us some background on where we are with in general with cybersecurity, what's happening in across as far as governments, I think especially, but even individuals and businesses, and what's happening in that. So kind of fill us in on where we're at.
Good? Okay. So first, just want to thank the committee for inviting me out today to speak on this topic. I am passionate about it. I've spent my entire career in this field. So you guys invited me out here to tell you everything I know about cybersecurity in 10 minutes. I'll do my best. When you were leading prayer, that's what I was praying about, is that I do a good job at that. So thank you for that. I do prefer an engaging conversation, so I have presented materials. I'm going to take you all through cybersecurity one-on-one. What do you need to know about cybersecurity? Okay, but please feel free to jump in at any time if you have questions. Fair enough?
To jump in right there.
Okay.
We can't do that.
You can't do that.
Don't
Okay.
Come through the chair.
Okay, then I will go through the presentation. That's fair. Okay. So first up, the very basics of cybersecurity. The first thing I would want anybody to know about the field of cybersecurity and where we are at today is there is no such thing as perfect cybersecurity, okay? It does not matter if we invest 100% of the state's resources in cybersecurity. It is still likely that we will get attacked and we will get compromised, okay? So that's the first thing to know. So after that, once we've established that as our baseline, what is cybersecurity, or what are the tenets of cybersecurity? So for those of us that are in the business, cybersecurity focuses around CIA, okay? But maybe not the CIA that you're thinking about. We call it the CIA triad. So the notion of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, okay? So people that are interested in cybersecurity want to protect information and computer systems for these three things. And what does that mean? So confidentiality obviously means we want to keep information private, right? So only the people that should have access to see information should have it. Integrity means that we're able to account for the integrity of that information. So only authorized individuals are allowed to alter data and access systems. And availability means that we want to ensure that systems and data are available when we need them, okay? And that if an attacker attacks us, then that usually around ransomware, those sorts of things, that's what they're attacking, is the availability of those systems. So that is the CIA triad and fundamentally what cybersecurity is all about. What cybersecurity is not IT, okay? And so that is a common misunderstanding that I think we all have. Cybersecurity has historically grown up within IT organizations, but fundamentally cybersecurity is a risk management function. So the better way to think about cybersecurity is it's like buying insurance. It's all about how much risk mitigation do you want to pay for and what level of maturity do you want to get to, okay? So, and really what we're trying to do is identify risk and make decisions about, do we want to accept risk? Do we want to reduce risk by buying it down through either investing in cybersecurity or other measures? Do we want to transfer risk or just all out avoid it by not doing that risky thing, okay? So what's the name of the game? Really, at the end of the day, there's a continuum, and what I would argue is table stakes within the cybersecurity business is regulatory compliance. We must comply with the law, okay? So minimally, any organization should be spending enough money to comply with the law, okay? And then at the outset, on the highest end, if we were to invest everything, we're getting maximum risk reduction, a very mature IT and cybersecurity capability, and the goal is to have rapid incident response these days, okay? And the decision to make for anybody in the cybersecurity arena in an organization is, where on this continuum does that organization want to be? How much do you want to invest, and how mature a capability do you want to have, and how much risk do you want to buy down, okay? And understanding that, again, no matter how much we spend, we can't guarantee that something bad is not going to happen. So the other thing to know is it's a matter of time. It's not if, but when you're going to get hacked. And chances are a lot of our organizations are already compromised and they just don't know about it. Okay, they're not mature enough to even know that the attackers are already in their systems, controlling their systems, looking at their data, exporting their information, so on and so forth. That is the reality of where we're at today. And I would argue that the real problem that we're having fundamentally is not really just around investment in cyber capabilities, but it's that we're not good at the basic blocking and tackling of IT, okay? So excuse the metaphor. But I can tell you, so from my experiences at Georgia Tech has definitely invested in cybersecurity, and we are growing our capabilities and will continue to do so. And the thing that we struggle with is IT's ability to keep up and do the basic things that need to get done, and funding the basics of IT in order to make sure that we're reducing risk appropriately, okay? By the way, I really wanted to put a Georgia Tech picture up there for the basic blocking and tackling. It hasn't been going Georgia Tech's way recently. So okay, so to kind of illustrate the points, I'm going to walk you through a brief case study of Atlanta, right? So I'm sure everybody here is very familiar that Atlanta was attacked recently. It was definitely in the news. The entire city government, or close to, a fair bit of the city's government operations were brought to a screeching halt by a ransomware attack. And so this sort of alludes to what you were talking about when you were introducing me. What this is, ransomware effectively is a piece of, it's a virus or a piece of malware that when installed on a computer, holds the computer hostage. It encrypts all of the data on the file so that you cannot have access to it. And then it lays out a ransom saying, you must pay us this amount of money, and we promise, we're bad guys, but believe us, right? We promise we're going to give you your data back, okay? So, like I said, the impact was rather large. It happened in March 2018. The attack vector for this that the bad guys used is called a brute force attack, where they were just guessing passwords systematically to gain access to the computer system, okay? That sort of attack is very old school and sort of illustrative of the fact that we're still bad at the basics of IT and security, right? That sort of attack has been around for maybe 20, 30 plus years, okay? And easily there are ways to prevent those sorts of things that we're still not able to get to just because lack of resources or competencies. The name of the ransomware was called Samsam Ransomware. It came out of the Middle East. The ransom price that was initially given was $55,000. So they made a demand, we'll release your systems for the price of $55,000 in Bitcoin. What the city ended up spending, I've heard multiple estimates, but the one that I've heard most often is $2.5 million, right? So they could have paid $55,000 in ransom. They ended up paying $2.5 million, potentially more, to actually recover the systems. They didn't pay the ransom, but I would argue there's very good reasons not to pay the ransom, right? So they listened to their counterparts in the FBI who advised them that you can't trust these bad guys. Just because you pay them the $55,000, there's no guarantee you're going to get the money. And you also incentivize the bad behavior, okay? So if you pay the $55,000, you're emboldening the bad guys to continue this because they know they have people that will pay the ransom, okay? And so what went wrong? So if in fact, a brute force attack on the passwords was what was the root cause, simple two-factor authentication and other basic controls to limit brute force attacks could have been put in place. And again, these are all things that are well known and well studied and not terribly difficult to implement, okay? Next, how they were able to propagate through the environment. You have unpatched and out-of-date systems throughout the environment, right? So this is fundamental IT stuff that could and should be done, that you don't need a security professional to tell you that you need to patch your outdated systems, okay? Insufficient network segmentation, meaning you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And right now, the way the networks in many state and local governments are designed is that once you're in, and you have access to everything that's in that environment. So separating those out would help limit the attack surface. Anti-malware solutions were either not present or ineffective, meaning there's software that could be used to prevent these sorts of things from happening. I'm not totally clear on whether they were present or not or effective, but that is another possible way of preventing this stuff. Insufficient system backups. So the obvious answer to this is if I take away your ability to get at your data, well, if you have a backup of that data, it doesn't matter. You can restore that information. You don't have to negotiate with that guy, okay? And that, again, is sort of IT 101. We should all be backing up our data. We've known that for a long time. And insufficient incident response capabilities, right? So this is, again, the name of the game today is rapid incident response. We understand that we're going to get attacked. We understand we can't prevent all attacks. So how can we identify the attacker in our environment as fast as possible and then react and get them out of our environment as quickly as possible, okay? And just the last sort of point I'll illustrate, those items I have highlighted up there in red, getting back to the basic blocking and tackling, those are all basic blocking and tackling elements that, if they were good at those things, would have really reduced the chances of this thing happening or spreading as fast and as wide as it did, okay?
And I don't see any questions right now. We're going to go, okay, Representative Montahan. Yeah, I want to move on to the next presenter, but go ahead.
I'm trying to be quick. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
This also happened in Jackson County, where they paid $400,000 in ransom. And
okay.
So obviously it's a big issue. It shut down their jail, their administrative offices for quite some time. So we definitely want to address it. Do you know if George, this is just questions that I have because it interests me. We need to be doing something about it. How can we help prepare counties and cities? And to that, are there published best practices that we can give to our cities and our counties to help them prepare for these?
Yes, sir.
There are.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
I'd love to have a copy of that. $400,000 isn't a little bit of money, so we definitely want to get them that information. And when we talked about the two-factor authentication, I know that there has been some SIM spoofing. Do you know if that is something that can be controlled via? Is that something, SIM spoofing over a telephone?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody stealing your information and then stealing your SIM and swapping it with their phone and
Sure.
then getting into your account.
Yeah.
Obviously, $400,000 is a target.
Right.
A quick phone call isn't a high watermark to try to reach. In your experience, is that something that we could tackle, or is that something that's more federal?
I definitely think it's something that we can tackle, right? So using a phone or phone call or push technology is not the only way to do two-factor authentication,
Okay.
right? So there are more modern methods that obviously account for those vulnerabilities and are the best way to do them today. But I would argue even vulnerable two-factor authentication is better than no two-factor authentication.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it? I've seen keychains and stuff like that for two-factor authentication. What in your opinion is probably the best way of approaching a two-factor authentication for login to a critical system in a county or city?
Sure. So you can have like cert-based methods where you're installing it on a thumb drive and
Okay.
having control of the thumb drive. You have to plug it into the machine and it's doing validation. based off of that, right, and using cryptographic methods to do the actual, validation.
Okay.
So there are methods, and there are vendors that are available that can do those sorts of things.
Okay. And that would also be available, those vendors?
Yes, sir.
In a list form of some sort?
I don't know if I'm sure there are lists available. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your
Appreciate
time today. Appreciate
Presentation
it.
very much. We have David Allen here, who is the Chief Information Security Officer, Georgia Technology Authority, or GTA as we know it. Mr. Allen? And Calvin Rhodes.
Thank you.
They can introduce, okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I was just going to take really 1 minute to remind you of who all the Technology Authority is and what we do, and then get into the cybersecurity discussion. So, Georgia Technology Authority has a responsibility for managing policies and giving guidance to state agencies only in the executive branch. And it's not all the executive branch. The constitutionally elected office holders are not part of our authority, as well as Board of Regents. And so, but all the other agencies are to follow our policies. Georgia's a little unique that we have a public-private partnership. We're like 2 other states that have adopted this model. And so when you're reading about that we are providing services to 85 executive branch agencies, 15 of those agencies account for about 70 to 75% of the state spend in IT. So that's been our key focus since 2008. Making sure that those agencies have a very protected environment. Those decisions were made from a policy standpoint that was more budget driven. And so as we have our discussion, we'll talk about our role in playing with those executive branch agencies, and then those larger agencies, just trying to make sure that some of the things that have been mentioned we can address. So David Allen is the Chief Information Security Officer. I didn't tell you what I do. I'm Calvin Rose, the Executive Director of the Technology Authority, and also the State CIO. So, David?
Thank you, Calvin. As Calvin mentioned, I'm David Allen, the State CISO. I have been in this role since April 1st of 2019, right about the time all the events that we've been talking about started to occur. Calvin didn't mention he had that served up for me before I took the job. But that's kind of what I fell in on, so it's been very interesting times. Prior to that, I was the Chief Information Officer for the Georgia Army National Guard, an organization that I still belong to and serve in part-time. So as a result of what's been the questions that were posed by this committee and why we're here today, I just welcome the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and the committee members, to just give you an overview of our posture for cybersecurity in the state, to kind of give you an insight to some of the efforts that we've done to improve cybersecurity in 2019, and then to answer your ultimate question, what are some of the discussion points and things we need to be thinking about as we progress in the future that will improve our security posture. So in the first slide you have in slide 3 in your handout is just a quick illustration of our concept of support within the state. You see there in the diagram, GTA is in the middle. As a result of an arrangement between the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, my Office of Information Security is the first responder to any incident that happens in the state, and we do leverage their existing emergency communication structure down to the local county EMA level. So when an incident is reported, whether it's a state agency or a local government, we would be the first to assess and determine the severity of the incident and what additional resources may be needed. And also for executive agencies, any kind of report comes up through our help desk. You notice there on the right, the Department of Administrative Services. They manage and provide oversight into our cyber insurance policy that exists for the executive branch. Moving on down, you see the Fusion Cell, where the FBI, GBI, and other law enforcement agencies collaborate. I have an analyst that actually works in the Fusion Center as part of the Cyber Crimes Task Force. So that's another mechanism of reporting and collaboration that we do should an incident happen with the state that's been leveraged in these incidents. You see there the Georgia Department of Defense, our Georgia Army National Guard, and the Air National Guard has cyber capabilities, and those are available as in any other emergency. specifically for Severity 1 type incidents where life, health, and safety is involved. Cyber mission forces are available to assist there. You see at the top, federal partners. We also partner and have regular communications with the Department of Homeland Security and leverage the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, commonly known as the MSISAC, who regularly pushes threat intelligence information and threats and vulnerabilities that we share not only with state agencies but also local and city governments that we have partnerships with on a regular basis. So once we have an event, we have a few options that go when we do initial incident response, either through the capabilities within my own team. If it's a small enough scope, we can handle it. In the event, it's a state agency that's part of the insurance policy. We may decide to leverage that for further assistance, and we have done that in some of the ransomware incidents. If they're not a part of that, or even like at the local level, we have pre-vetted security vendors on security contracts at Georgia Technology Authority, and we've been able to leverage those as well to get help to some of the county governments that experience some of the ransomware attacks. So we are engaged down to the local level and have been since I came on, and we've been able to use a few different levers to bring help and respond to those events. So the next slide just goes into some of the outreach. So since my arrival, my focus has been on increasing outreach at the state and local level. In addition to the information sharing at a number of regular recurring meetings, we are active working on sharing threat intelligence, and we continue to develop that capability. We collaborate with the Georgia Cyber Center for the Cyber Workforce Academy to develop new training initiatives that are available both at state and local level. And this year will also mark our second annual CyberDot exercise, which is an interagency exercise. And this year we'll be using the cyber range down at the Cyber Center to train 35 individuals on a very immersive, hands-on cyber attack environment. And we'll continue to leverage that exercise. And then just finally, my office also offers tabletop facilitation. So any agency that wants to exercise an incident response plan from a broad business perspective, we facilitate those, and our most recent one we conducted there was in September of 2019 for the Department of Audits and Accounts. So we are very engaged at multiple levels when it comes to cybersecurity. The next slide, committee members, you do not have this, and Mr. Chairman, you do, and we can refer, by the event numbers. It displays the sequence of events that occurred over the past year and the events that we responded to. One county was already mentioned, and that was one we were involved with in the front. And we've had subsequent ransomware attacks that we've responded to. But I guess the takeaway there is, despite the high volume of attacks in a very compressed time period, we have been able to leverage some of those resources that I mentioned previously to effectively respond to those attacks. And we've also leveraged the Department of Defense Cyber Forces, not because it met the standard of a SEV 1, but we've had a memorandum of agreement with that organization for a number of years between GTA and DOD. And when we saw an opportunity to actually enact that, to work the process and figure out how to deal with it in the future, we took that opportunity. And that definitely helped my team to learn where our gaps were and what we needed to train to in the future. So that's a great partnership and a great capability we have within the state that's at our disposal. And also, just it's evident that our focus has been more on more than just state agencies. Anybody that's called and asked for assistance, we've provided it. It could be as simple as just an advise and assist over the telephone to actually going on site for as long as they needed us until we facilitated those extra resources. And I think that has been key, as my colleague from Georgia Tech mentioned. A key is rapid incident response, and my office has been able to provide that capability to our state. And finally, I'll just ask that you keep all this activity in mind over the next few slides. Despite all this going on, we've still been able to advance a few initiatives that's increased our posture at the state level. So at GTA, we rely heavily on self-reported data for the state agencies. And right now, my focus is really to continue to grow that capability and make that data better and standardized as we go year over year. And as done with my predecessor, we continue to focus on audits and assessments and partnerships to make sure we have full situational awareness of where our state agencies stand, and to provide similar resources to local government should they ask. The next slide, just some additional changes really quickly for 2019. We've improved our reporting processes and collaboration through multiple state agencies. We've improved our information and intel collection across the state. We have passed a new standard for measuring cybersecurity for our executive agencies as it relates to our insurance policy in an attempt to not only standardize but provide them a good priority checklist of the controls they should be implementing at their level to be more secure. We've implemented standard job descriptions for a new cyber job family at the state that's available, and we're in the process of rolling out. So we'll have visibility to the cyber vacancies that exist to the state, and we can recruit to those more effectively instead of them being just assigned to an IT role. And we've aligned that job family to specific certification requirements for our state cyber employees and align that with the training we're developing at the Georgia Cyber Center. Finally, Mr. Chairman, just on your question on future legislative discussion points, the first, in terms of open records and open meeting rules, some of that precludes the release of all the cyber-related details that we could share that may benefit this body or your future discussions. I just think that's important to note. The second, as we've gone through all of these incidents, no requirement exists for mandatory incident reporting by state or local. In some cases, we've just found out about a local entity having issues after the fact. I mean, they by no means are required to give us a report. When we hear about those things, we do reach out and ask the question, do you need help? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. But I think if it involves the citizens of Georgia, it's important that we're able to quickly leverage all the resources at our disposal and not wait, as you've heard here today. The third is Calvin mentioned the agencies that are under our governance, by statutory authority. There are a few that are not, just in terms of that reporting. I can't vouch for what reporting does occur at those levels, but I would think as a state that kind of situational awareness is something we would want. It may exist, but it's not something that is regularly reported to us, and sometimes that's something that's misunderstood just in the state, that we have SA over all of it, but in fact we do not. That's not a hit on those agencies. I'm just setting expectations for what information we have access to at my level. And then finally, it's come up a question of cyber insurance, but the legislative and judicial branches are not a part of the policy that the executive agencies have. There is an ad hoc committee looking at cyber insurance at the judicial committee, and just in the spirit of collaboration, I'm a part of that. And I sit on that committee as well, so that's in discussion. So just a little insight into some of the efforts that are going on around the state since some of these activities occurred. That concludes my brief, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity and welcome any questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. Looks like we do have, is that a question?
You got time.
We got time. That's why we're here for this. Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is very fascinating. I'm a private business owner. I've had a little bit of experience with cybercrime in my business, and it's a huge hassle and expense. Could you comment on the success of law enforcement agencies dealing with this problem? I know we got several in the state that do, or FBI even. I mean, how are we combating this? Is it are we making any progress?
We've had regular discussion with the Attorney General's office, and when these things occur, we do share that information. I can only speak to what I understand. I'm not a lawyer, but we've had an incident. We've shared information as necessary with the FBI for those cases that go and they're prosecuting at the federal level. More often than not, when it's been activities from recurring actors, they may have enough evidence and they're not that interested, and then it falls to the local level. But the way I understand it, there is a certain level of crime that occurs at the state level that the bodies at our state are interested in prosecuting, and they're working on the things that would allow them to go after those types of individuals. For example, the accounts where they're asking for Bitcoin or something like that or where the money's changing hands. Those are kind of the people they are targeting. But we are actively talking with those groups that want to go after that type of crime and sharing that information that they need to do that. I think they've had some success, but I know they would like much, much more given the extent of the problem.
Could I follow up with one quick? I noticed you told us that several other state agencies such as DOE and USG do not use y'all. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Have they had any discussion with y'all about their willingness or wanting to use GTA to help them with technology security?
In terms of the university system, we collaborate with them regularly and we share information. I know at one time, they took GTA policy as their own and have since gotten more mature and developed their own. But that's an entity where we regularly talk, we regularly present at their forums. When I get information that relates to their agencies, because even though they're not governed by us, they still pull services from GTA.
Okay.
So we get intel reports from the MSI SAC and Homeland Security on things that are going on in our network, and we freely share that information with them. But what they do with that is in accordance with their own policies and procedures.
Okay.
Right, and to be clear on item 3, that was really just asking around reporting. Just if you have an event, if you to report it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much for the presentation. I feel good and a lot better to know that we have, first of all, we have a single point of contact, which is you for the state.
Yes, sir.
And that the, even and the other agencies that don't actually come under you, what you do, they still have a point of contact too that they can get help and get training, and also for the local governments. So that's something that had been a question of mine, I guess a concern too, for some time about is there somebody in the state that's actually, I think we're referring to yesterday as the czar, the cybersecurity czar. So that's good. That's a good title. But we need that, and I appreciate it. And any other questions we have? It was a good presentation, and thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks for your time. Thanks to the committee.
All right, we do have a couple more presenters. Charlotte Davis, Government Relations Associate, Georgia Municipal Association. And one of the reasons for having these presentations is that Ms. Davis and I had a conversation some time ago about, is there a single point of contact in the state to go to as far as help and things like that. So if you can enlighten us on what's happening with the cities, it'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Chairman Parson. Good afternoon, committee members. Charlotte Davis with the Georgia Municipal Association. I'm by no means a cyber expert, Chairman Parsons, but I'm fortunate to be joined by one today. Ryan Wilson is the cyber guy, our cyber czar at GMA. Since you and I spoke back in the summer, Chairman Parsons, we've actually been able to have a number of efforts underway, a part of which was bringing Ryan on board. We know that obviously our Georgia cities specifically are under attack, just as other public entities or private entities, and really hope to be a resource for all of our member cities moving forward. Representative Montana, I appreciate your question about best practices and guidelines. That really, Ryan is going to get into that a bit more, but is really what we hope as GMA, and I'm sure ACCG as well, to be as much of a resource to our folks, because we'll, in most cases, be the first to know locally when cyber attacks do happen. I should also mention that Electric Cities of Georgia and MEAG Power are our partners, and we all have similar memberships, and they have a number of initiatives for training and assessments and resources that they've put up on their website, and a number of other forums that they've held. So we're all trying to work in partnership and learn as much as we can to fight cyber attacks. But if it's okay with you, Chairman, I would like to turn it over to Ryan, who's prepared a presentation, can answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman, Council. As Charlotte mentioned, I worked, started with GMA last year. Apologize. A little better? All right. I engaged with GMA last year. Previously, I was with a private company, an MSP, and I did all of their cybersecurity and information technology for 13 years with VC3. And then prior to that, I was in the Army and did security work with them as well. So when we first started having the conversation with GMA, the big concern was around local governments and cities and all these cyber attacks that were going on, and how could they, help protect them and educate them and, help them out, because there's a lot of these cities that are very small that just don't have the budget, or don't even know exactly where to even start and begin on that. So that being said, just real quickly, I know this text is a little small, but this is kind of an overview of some of the attacks that have happened in Georgia and across the country. And then more recently, that's not even on here, I know that Dunwoody was recently had a cyber attack in this past December as well. So, all of these cities are just getting hit by it, and a lot of them don't have the budget, don't have the, cybersecurity staff, personnel on staff to kind of, combat some of this. So the whole purpose is GMA has created an IT security program to help assist these cities with both training, protection, and just, assessments and gap analysis and things of that nature to try to combat some of the cybersecurity things that we're seeing. A couple facts that are out there that I thought were very interesting, would be interesting to this committee. According to Malwarebytes, there's been a 365% increase on attacks for municipal governments in the past 12 months. Only about 17.1% of the government agencies pay the ransom. 70% reported not paying. But out of that being said, only 33% of cities report having any type of incident response plan. So if you go back to my colleagues that have presented earlier, they talk about that rapid response. You can't have a rapid response if you don't have an incident response plan in place. And only 33%, and that's a national number. That's not even specific to Georgia. I believe that number to be even lower, unfortunately, here. According to Gartner, these disasters cost about $5,600 a minute, $300,000 an hour. If you look at Atlanta, Dunwoody, all these places that have had, cyber attacks, they get expensive. They're out there. One thing that I thought that was very interesting, the average time to identify a breach is 190 days. The reason I wanted to mention that to this committee is because that means that they've gotten in, they've done some sort of brute force, installed malware, something has happened. They're in your system, but it's been in there for 190 days before it's even detected. The reason they do that is because they try to leverage other computer systems, and so they want it to propagate through the entire network. So that's why they're leaving it on there before they actually then request the cyber, the bitcoins, or they lock and encrypt your data, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then after that, it takes another 57 days on average to contain the breach. So, not favorable. Next one. Just real quick, I wasn't sure of the overall familiarity. I know with our local cities, a lot of them don't know the different types, but I wanted to mention that, there's several types of attacks out there. So you have your standard phishing attacks that come about where somebody is, trying to get you to put your credentials in and just trick you into logging in and putting your personal credentials that are applicable to your systems within your organization. Then there's more specific ones around spear phishing, and those are more targeted. So those, we've seen very, very specific attacks for city managers, finance directors, et cetera, where they're using, because most of their, as public officials, your information is on the web, so anybody can get to it. So they're using Jerry, city manager, Bob, finance director. I'm in a meeting right now. I need you to real quickly send money to this organization. I'm not available to talk. Have copied their signature line of their cell phone and put it in there. So those are more spear phishing, very specific, and also called whaling, where they're asking and trying to get money. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that 2 years, 3 years, 5 years ago, these attacks were, more generic in nature. But now they've found that the majority of the information for these public officials, city managers, finance directors, council members are all online. So it's very easy for them to have a very, very targeted attack against these cities. As you'll see on here, just real quickly, that there's about 45% of IT state that they don't feel like they have the necessary support from their council or from their executive authority to invest in cybersecurity. So that's the key takeaway, is getting people educated around and getting council members to understand and get trained up so that they can have the necessary funding to assist and protect the city from. You mentioned best practices, sir, and so kind of wanted to jump into that real quick. My colleagues have already touched on this, so I'll be brief, but the biggest portion is the fundamentals. The fundamentals are things that are not happening every day, whether they don't know what to do as far as fundamentals or they can't or they have not budgeted for it. Automated patch management, antivirus, web filtering, advanced threat protection on their email, backups, cyber security insurance. All of these things are just base level, where if a city or a county or any government entity had proper backups, you wouldn't be talking about, $14 million, $2.5 million, things of that nature. And so just getting the education and the resources to them so that they can, implement the proper best practices. So that being said, as I mentioned before, GMA, we just rolled this out at Cities United this past weekend. We've IT services, and a part of that is the IT security and strategic consulting. The key things that I want to mention on here are training, security awareness training for all of our cities. That is our goal, to get everyone on security awareness training so that their employees are aware of what's going on. And then the second part are assessments. We're pushing out assessments so they can have an understanding and a gap analysis that they can look at and say, these are where our gaps are, and this is what we need to do in order to correct those and have a heightened state of security within the environment. And then the second piece of that is an offering that GMA's had for a long time, which is IT in a Box, which then would implement these solutions for them. And really, this is just the slick.
Before we go to, if that's okay, I don't mean to interrupt you, but on the last slide there, you had something about, we could roll it back.
This one?
Maybe it's one before this. Okay. So I think most folks know about the antivirus and all that kind of stuff. And
right.
The question I had was about this. So the cloud-based backups, can you just speak to that, whether or not these, my understanding is now they're creating them, if you use like a Dropbox type service or use some type of cloud-based backup, are they getting into that Dropbox? And from what I've heard is they're trying to clear the machines, okay, and then they install Dropbox, and then it replicates again.
Yep, absolutely.
Is that happening? Is there truth to that? Because that's obviously problematic when you try to make a backup or a mirror of this drive, and then you've got the Dropbox, and that's where the original file was.
Sure, absolutely. Great question. So, the short answer is yes. So what you're seeing happening is that, for example, you may have a backup locally on your system, and then in addition, you have a backup in the cloud. That's great, wonderful. But those backups, what I see most commonly, they're not encrypted. So then what happens is the ransomware, it encrypts the backups. And so now, remember when I talked about that 190-day gestation period? So that's one of the reasons that they're doing that as well. So now, all your backups that you think that you had in the cloud that were safe, nope. You've backed up the infected/encrypted data, and now you can't get to it.
Right. And so to follow that up, and thank you for that, that answers the question. To follow that up, are these active perpetrators? So when I say that, are they actively, and I understand the spear phishing may be, especially for utilizing email and others, obviously if you get a response, that's when they probably start actively engaging, but are they getting a screen of people saying, okay, well, these are the ones we infected, and these are the ones that have, gestation, what you will, gestational period, if you will. I know that's a strange term. We talk about computers, but do they have a screen where they see which ones are green-lit and those are the ones that they're going to try to attack? Or do they even know that these are governmental agencies? Do they have that level? Is it that molecular to them? Or are they just saying, hey, let's just see what we can get, and then it all kind of comes to, is it random or is it orchestrated? I guess that's the question.
Right. Unfortunately, since they don't kind of tell us their tactics, it's hard to say. My professional opinion is that I think that it's a little bit of both. I think they probably start out more random than anything else, but I definitely have seen targeted attacks against cities. So my answer would be I think it's more random in general, but for example, when the WannaCry virus came out and they affected all those computers around the world, there definitely was a very scripted, targeted, we're going to try to roll this out to as many systems as we can, and they knew which systems were infected so that they could then cross-pollinate into other areas.
Have you seen this affect more affluent cities than the more rural cities? Is there any type of evidence there that will that give you some type of?
I think so. I mean, if you look, at the list of cities and locations that, have had attacks, Albany, New York, Jackson County, Florida, Lake City, Florida, all these different ones. I think so. I mean, I think for the smaller cities, right, I think there's two parts to it. They're not as complex and don't have as much information out there on the web, so they may have one single server or computer, so they're not after there. But I definitely think they're aware of the larger San Francisco Municipal Railway, things of that nature. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's the question I have.
Yep.
Representative Jackson, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I have a two-part question. All your best practices basically deal with how to mitigate attacks from the outside in. I've yet to hear any of the presentation talk about how to make sure that the attacks don't happen from the inside out.
Sure.
That's the first part. And the second part, I know we did this a lot during my days, years in the military. We created a red team. And our red team was basically some real good hackers. They always try to hack our system at the Pentagon. And so that way we can sort of self-assess. So it wasn't a basic audit, making sure everybody changed their passwords, backups, stuff like that. But it was more advanced. Mm-hmm. And so that way we look for those vulnerabilities by having our internal red team looking for those vulnerabilities.
Sure. Absolutely. Great question. I'll start with the second one first. So, yes, I mean, you're talking about SIPRNet. I'm an Army guy myself, so very hardened systems and whatnot. The challenge that you get is, trying to balance business needs and being able to be mobile and do the job that's required, and then protect against attacks that are out there. So I don't really see the hardened systems like we have in the Army with SIPRNet and things of that nature as much. But what I do, if you notice under the Security Information and Event Management, SIM, as a part of that, when you implement it, it does do the pen testing and kind of has the red team that you're talking about. I will say that what you're going to find is for your smaller cities or even your larger cities, it's expensive. SIM and all that's very expensive. So I think at GMA, we're in the very early stages of this. I mean, we literally just rolled this out this weekend. I mean, my goal is long term is to be able to provide those two cities at a more cost, affordable price. Because today, I mean, a pen test could run you $30,000, $60,000, and a lot of cities just can't afford that. So good question. And then as far as the inside out, you're right. That also goes back to the training portion. I think policies, procedures. I will say that we do a little bit of, with the cybersecurity training, there is some internal portions to that to make sure that the systems are protected and looking at the individuals that, are accessing the system. My colleagues mentioned making sure that you're controlling access to secure systems. So there is that, and that's a part of the policies and compliance portion.
Can I follow up, Chair? I know. I just want to follow up. So based on that, when you look at our larger cities, I mean, when you look at Georgia, we got 538 of them, right? But there are some cities that are very critical. So let's say, for example, cities that deal with possibly they have a backdoor access to other vulnerable, like CDC,
Sure.
Emory.
Right.
We got the Federal Reserve Bank here. So their system is only as strong as the cities that's helping them create this fortress, if you will. So
Absolutely.
maybe we just need to look at those areas first that got some high value nodes. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Let's look at those cities first to make sure that those vulnerabilities are not there. So that way, because in the end, if a city gets hit, the newspaper is going to read Georgia was hit,
Right.
not a particular city was hit, right? Alpharetta, Atlanta, etc.
I agree.
We are losing our committee. If
That was it,
you've
sir.
wrapped up. Okay, well, I appreciate it very much, and it's very encouraging to know that y'all are doing this. And,
Thanks so
you know,
much,
I just
Mr.
wanted to,
Chairman.
one reason I want to do this is just to make sure that, I mean, you didn't have to have a committee meeting to make sure that you knew that there was a contact at the state level. I think that's one of the questions you had. But
We appreciate our partners.
But thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being here. And we have a last presenter. We have Steve. Is it? If you introduce yourself and tell us who you're with.
I'm with Fayette County, Georgia, and I'm to be your best presenter because I didn't bring a PowerPoint. I think you've heard MS Isaac bounced around a little bit today. That is a free service for cities and counties, and it's one of the clearinghouses for the database. So a lot of the threats, and they actually have an entire laundry list because they're backed through Homeland Security of resources they can give to not only cities but also counties. MS Isaac, it stands for Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and it's funded through Homeland Security, and they basically have a 24/7 operation. There's an entire, if you just type in MS Isaac on your website, it'll bring up all the different resources. All you really have to do, because you're a governmental agency, is actually register, and at that point they actually send out newsletters, weekly updates, threats assessments. When all the stuff with Iran was going on, they were the first to put stuff out there saying, hey, look for these things. And so it's a good way for especially a small county or a small city to actually get some of that heads up in regards to how to react for some of that. I'm not going to focus a lot on the hacking and the websites and all that. I think you've got enough of that to look at. I will tell you that there's certain things that we do, and we're like over 200 acres, square miles, let's say, and we've got like 765 employees. But just to kind of give you a feel for what that means from a technology perspective, is I've got 765 managed endpoints, 65 websites, 17 infection layers, which means something to the IT folks. I'm a CPA, so I don't have the acronym of CIO. But I will tell you that we've received a 55% increase on the type of attacks we've gotten, and most of those attacks are through the easiest mechanism these folks have, which is email. A lot of the phishing things. So one of the things that we do, and my CIO came from a banking background, so he is like as radicalized as your first presenter, because he is all about, I call him my cyber evangelist. But what we do is we actually send out false emails and we send out false indications, and if you click on them, then you get to be retrained in regards to how to do IT services. So that's a really cheap way of actually doing it, because most of the breaches that you have are going to be internal. I think one of the representatives mentioned, what's the weakest point? Your weakest point is going to be your end user. And so one of the things you have to do is you have to be very vigilant in that, and then also look at your day-to-day monitoring. One of the things that I haven't heard talk about a lot is the fact that we've moved from filing cabinets to have everything online. So a lot of this has to be for a convenient-based type access. And so with convenience comes vulnerability. With vulnerability comes a different kind of access, and it's just a different kind of sophistication out there now. So one of the things we've focused on is I call it the talent gap, where we train people, we get certified, they get certified. There's actually 4 certifications you can do through MS ISACs, and every time I get somebody the 3 certifications, they get snapped up at some state agency. And so a lot of it has to do with the fact that you can't keep up with the salaries. I tell folks, we're Fayette County, we get the salaries south of I-20. So our salaries are a little less, and so what ends up happening is people come up and they work in Atlanta or they go north. employee awareness training. I can't beat that one to death, and also protecting the data. You know, one of the things we talked about, and I think what a lot of folks talk about when they talk about cybersecurity, they're really talking about ransomware, right? That's what everybody. That's the fear. My biggest fear is I've got systems that if people get into them, can cause public safety type issues. I've got a water system. I got a 911 system that's operating. I've got medical records. I've got people's social security numbers. I got customer files. And so what I tried to do is we try to segment those particular areas and create stronger firewalls and straighter protections around those and do more end user type security for those systems. Because let's face it, we're in the state of Georgia. If you send me a request, I'll pretty much give you anything you ask for in 3 days without redacting what has to be redacted. So most of my data is pretty open, accessible, and if it's on the web, it doesn't really matter. But some of that data needs to be protected more. And so what we try to do is we try to focus on those areas and make sure that that information is secure and that we've got the IT security protocols in place to make that happen. And another thing that the y'all kept asking for is, you know, so what is the best practices? I think you can go to GMA or you can go to ACCG. There's all kind of information technology best practices people can download and implement in regards to policies and procedures. I'll also mention that the National League of Cities has a pretty good protecting our data securities, cyber security type document that people can get, as well as CIS Controls, which is the Center of Internet Security Controls, has some very good documentation, as well as the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So there's a lot of information out there. Part of the problem that you've heard from the cities, and it's a bigger problem for some of the smaller counties, we're actually in fairly good shape because we come from, you know, we're a pretty well-to-do county on the south side of Atlanta, so we don't have as much issues as some of my smaller counterparts. But information technology, and especially cyber, because I will tell you that I think what's happened is the sophistication has been very targeted to governments lately. And a lot of that probably has to do with Washington, D.C., to be quite frank. But I think people don't really understand that from a government perspective, we really haven't had to worry about that. And so now I think there's a different, and so I appreciate the chairman asking these questions because I think it is important. And if you want to send me an email, my cyber evangelist will wear somebody out in regards to documentation and information. So.
And it's
yes,
a complex issue. It really is. It's
yes,
hard
it is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to just make one quick point. One thing that's sort of unique about county government is we interface with the state in many databases. So, for example, the new drive system that you all appropriated money that's been rolled out and continues to be rolled out, that's the tag and title database with the driver's license database. Well, guess who's inputting all that information? It's county staff and county offices that are putting in all that tag and title information. And so there needs to be this partnership, obviously, between the state and local governments, because even if you're doing what you're supposed to do on your end, what if a county person doesn't do what they're supposed to do on their end? That could be with GCIC, it could be with voting machines, it could be with lots of different things where county governments are basically acting like the arm of the state. So we're interfacing with you. And then one last point, there was a bill that came through Governmental Affairs, I believe yesterday, and it's dealing with actually school security plans and making sure that the school systems can talk about security plans in executive session. One thing that came up at that meeting that us and GMA were thinking about is, have we looked at whether counties and cities should have some discretion to discuss cybersecurity in an executive session? Because right now we can't. And so for some of the reasons Steve's made, that's not information you necessarily want to get out, that you just got hacked and here's what has been compromised. And right now, we don't have no way to discuss that under the open meetings law, and of course, and you mentioned the open records law. We have to give information in 3 days, but that's something else to consider.
Now, one thing, these people that do the attacking, it's their job. That's what they do for a living, and they're all over the world. If you ever look at if you have a campaign website, for example, if you ever look at the stats on it, I was surprised. I usually don't even look at it. But I looked at it, I think it was last year, I took a look at the stats on it, and there's nothing on my website that would be of use to anybody. But they're looking for anything, looking for maybe a password that you have on there, or any kind of information, or maybe you have a portal to some another website or something, another server where they could get on into something. But you'll look and you'll be surprised that most of your hits are not from your district, But they're from all over the world. They're from Pakistan, China, Russia, I mean, you name it. Poland, all over, mostly Eastern Europe and Asia. Hundreds and thousands of them, because they're just, I mean, they do it to websites, anything that they can find, because they're just looking for something, like I say, a password, something on there that you might have, a portal to something else constantly. And I think probably because of the tags you have on there, you know, like in my case, the tags would be state government, state of Georgia, Republican Party. I mean, you know, things like that, and they see those tags. Okay, that's a good place. We need to look there. And I mean, I've talked to our GTA, and they said, well, there's you know, there's nothing on your website that would be of any use to them, but they don't know that. I mean, it's just like something there. It's a basket of okay, let's look through there and see what we can find. I mean, that's kind of what it is, and it's their job. That's how. I mean, these are people that, you know, all they need is a computer and a connection, and they live in some little village in East Europe, Eastern Europe, or Pakistan, or wherever. And if they can take this over, or make you think that they've taken over your system, and get whether it's $500, I don't know how the bitcoins work, but if they can get $500 or $5,000 or $50,000 out of you, whether they've actually taken control of it or not. If they can make you think that they have, then it makes people very nervous and makes them panic, and we'll go ahead and do something. I don't pretend to know all the ins and outs of it, but that much I do know, and I do know it's a dangerous, it's a bad situation that we have, and that's the reason that, and especially as it relates to state government, and also the political subdivisions of the state. And just want to kind of get an idea of what's happening, and y'all have done a great job of presenting that to us.
And I will tell you, GTA is a very good person to speak with, because we've actually reached out to them for some things. One of the backup questions you asked was, what about these backups? And I totally agree that one of the simplest things to fix a backup you really even think about is you back it up weekly, and then you just check on Tuesday to make sure you can access it, that it actually works. It's a real simple thing to do, but if you wait 190 days, you'll be looking for a job.
I will mention this too. We don't have many people here, but I've been telling people this all over wherever I go. The last 11 years of my military experience was spent with the 335th Signal Command down in East Point, Georgia. And they do a lot of the cyber now in connection with Fort Gordon. But anyway, I find this exciting. Some people, I think a lot of younger people don't, but the United States Army, I've learned this through the 335th down there, the United States Army now have added to the disciplines that they will offer a direct commission to, in addition to the ministry, what did we say yesterday? Medical, law. With the Army or any of the services now, you can get a direct commission with those at different levels. It could be anything from a second lieutenant up to a colonel, depending on your experience. But they have now added cyber. If you have the requisite amount of training that they need, you can get a direct commission with the United States Army in the cyber disciplines. And I think that, to me, that's just amazing. If you've never been in the Army, you may not think it, but trust me, there is a world of difference between enlisted and being an officer. So if you know any young people that are interested in that, spread the word, because I think it's a tremendous opportunity. And with that, I believe that we're ready to adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.